Juan Sebastian Veron was born on the 9th of March 1975 in La Plata, Argentina. His father, Juan Ramon, was a professional footballer too, had a very successful career and would influence Seba's own footballing story in many profound ways. Juan Ramon was nicknamed the Witch, or La Bruja in Spanish. The exact origins of this moniker are unknown, though Juan Sebastian has a couple of theories. One of them is the shape of his nose, which looks quite a lot like those in cartoons. The other is his playing style. He was pretty skillful, great at dribbling and able to win matches all by himself. La Bruja enjoyed a hugely successful decade at Estudiantes and was a key man in their domination of South American football in the late 60s as they won 3 consecutive Copa Libertadores titles. One of La Bruja's most famous moments came in the final of the Intercontinental Cup in 1968 against Manchester United. Estudiantes took a slender 1-0 first leg lead with them to Old Trafford. Within 5 minutes, La Bruja had doubled their advantage.
And it's Veron! Oh dear! For United, number 11, Veron the Witch.
The match ended in chaos. George Best and Hugo Medina were both sent off for an off-the-ball incident in the 88th minute. Willie Morgan levelled the tie to death, but a legendary victory belonged to La Bruja and Estudiantes. Juan Sebastian's career naturally began at the biggest club in his hometown La Plata and the place that had made his father's name, Estudiantes. I spent a lot of time here when my old man was training the youth divisions. I practically grew up here at the club, Veron would later reminisce. Seba originally started playing up front like his father, but eventually found his natural place in the midfield. Although he did not take the same position on the pitch as his old man, he inherited his nickname, and Juan Sebastian was known as La Brujita, the Little Witch. He officially joined Estudiantes in 1993 at the age of 18. He broke into the first team at the end of the 93-94 season, making 7 appearances, but it was far from a gentle introduction into senior football, as the team were fighting for Primera Division survival. They did not prevail and were relegated. La Brujita was an ever-present the following season, making 38 league appearances, scoring 5 goals as he helped Los Pincharatas to return to the top flight at the first time of asking. He played the first third of the 95-96 season with Estudiantes before Buenos Aires Giants Boca Juniors came calling, handing over $1.5 million to take him to the capital. Here is where he would first meet the man who had already indirectly impacted his footballing journey, and that of every Argentine at the time. National hero, icon, deity, Diego Maradona. At the age of 35, El Diez was seeing out his spectacular career with Boca. Much later, Maradona would take credit for being the one who brought Veron to the club, revealing in a 2019 interview, "The one who took Veron to Boca was me. It wasn't Bilardo or Macri or anyone. Maradona took to the young midfielder, and during what would turn out to be a very short stay for Veron, gave him a gift which La Brujita treasures to this day. Playing with Maradona was amazing. His personality radiated energy. I was the youngest player of the squad, but he treated everyone in the same way. One day, at Boca's hotel, he calls 4 of us to his room. I have a gift for you, he says, and he hands a wrap box to each. I open it and read Rolex. It was a watch. I didn't know what to do. I don't normally use watches. To that day, I had a plastic digital watch when I needed it. My most luxurious watch had been a Casio with a calculator, and suddenly receiving that gift from him, I don't know if the others kept theirs, but I can say for sure that mine is very well kept." On the pitch, Veron was something of a mixed bag. Watching him, I was struck by his athleticism, his pace, power, work rate and determination, traits which made him a formidable midfielder. He was an intense and passionate tackler, a battler on the field. He was also technically gifted and comfortable on the ball, possessing a nice first touch as well as being unpredictable, inventive and brave while running at opponents. It wasn't all good though. While La Brujita would go on to be famous for his accurate and dazzling array of passing, some of his distribution back then can only be described as woeful. Granted, I only managed to watch 4 of his matches for Boca Juniors, but I was truly surprised by how frequently he relinquished possession with a loose ball. I will say though that he clearly was blessed with great vision to even try some of them. He also loved having a long-range crack at goal, but some of his attempts were optimistic at best and wild and wasteful at worst. His smashing goal from outside of the box against Huracan on his debut aside. Nevertheless, he was blatantly an immense talent and an important player for Boca Juniors, starting every match of his time at the club. He had been with them only a handful of months when interest in his services came from abroad, from Sampdoria and the Serie A. As La Bombonera were duking it out for the title, the management and Maradona were adamant that he stay. It was because of Diego though that La Brujita was dead set on a move to Italy. We used to watch Italian football when Diego played there. We used to get Diego's matches on the telly in the mornings. I wanted to play in the championship that Maradona had played in, not for anything else. I think it marked us all. Arriving in Italy was reaching the championship that Maradona played in, with that Napoli. Veron joined Sampdoria in the summer of 1996 for €5.6 million, signing off on his time at Boca Juniors with a cracking free kick against Estudiantes.
Primer gol del partido, Maradona que no, le pegó Verón, golazo. ¡Gol!
Not knowing a thing about the club he was joining, he started to learn about it on the plane, with the advice of the man who had been there and done it all before ringing in his ears. The settlement will be complicated, but you must be patient. You will enjoy playing in Italy, Maradona had told him. Veron would have learned that Sampdoria had been owned by Paolo Mantovani since the 70s. He strived to cultivate a welcoming atmosphere and a familial feeling around the club, as one of his former strikers Gianluca Vialli would later write. Mantovani was the classic father figure chairman, a throwback to another era. He loved the club and saw players, coaches, fans as members of an extended family. Despite this, La Brujita discovered Maradona's words to be true, as he found the first few months in Italy hard. At the beginning, it was really tough. The distance from home, feeling uprooted, the family, friends, habits, language. The first 4 months were truly difficult, permanently playing with the idea of quitting, saying I can't take anymore, I'm going back. It's an endurance test. I would go to this empty flat all alone, so I bought a dog. At Sampdoria, he was playing under Swedish manager Sven-Göran Eriksson, another man who would greatly impact his career. Veron's natural instinct as a player was to read the game and move around to whatever he thought he could influence proceedings the most. Initially, this was at odds with the tactical rigidity of the Serie A and the demands and expectations of the gaffer. My style generated quite a bit of trouble for the manager, because he would say, play here, but even if I started playing here, I inevitably ended up over there. At Sampdoria, Veron's teammates included dead ball specialist Sinisa Mihailovic, future World Cup winner Christian Karambou, and fellow new arrival, quick and prolific striker Vincenzo Montella. The most notable and important man La Brujita shared a pitch with that season was without a doubt forward Roberto Mancini. Mancini had been at Sampdoria for 14 years by the time Veron rocked up, and the Italian more or less ran the place.
When I had him first time in Sampdoria, he was a manager and a player. He did everything in the club. He was in the office, he was into the kitchen, controlling, bus driver, that he was on time, kitchen, everything.
During matches, if a player didn't do exactly what I have told them to do, he got upset and he was screaming, and the referee, could have killed referees.
The turning point for La Brujita after his struggles in the first few months came in a match against Inter Milan, and it involved Mancini. We were losing 3-1 to Inter. During the game, Roberto approaches me and tells me, relax, play as you know. If you play as you know, we'll win this. I don't know if it was by chance or I really played well, but we won 4-3 and I felt the settlement was over. Roberto Mancini was a role model and became more than a teammate to me. He was my older brother. Veron went on to become a revelation in his first season in Europe. Clarence Seedorf had been sold to Real Madrid in the same window that La Brujita had arrived, so he had some big and talented boots to fill in midfield, but fill them he did, making things tick for Sampdoria, scoring 5 and assisting 2 as he helped them to finish 6th and qualify for the UEFA Cup. That season had not been significant only for Veron's club career and making the move over to Europe, but marked a big milestone internationally as well, as he got his first cap for Argentina in a friendly against Poland in 1996. He came on as a substitute against Paraguay in the first match of their 1998 World Cup qualifiers, but then was left out of the squad as Argentina's bid to make it to France stuttered and stalled, winning just once in the first 4 matches. La Brujita was handed a start for a crucial away tie against table toppers Colombia. Seba was immense, helping Argentina to control the game and grab a vital 1-0 win courtesy of a bizarre Claudio Lopez goal.
Y Ortega va para el Piojo López en zona de juego, el Piojo. La cubría Mondragón. No, gol. ¡Gol!
It proved to be a turning point for Argentina and Veron as he featured in all but one of the remaining 8 matches, scoring once and assisting once as they qualified for France 98 as group winners. It was in his second season in Italy that La Brujita would really start casting spells, bewitching his opponents and enchanting fans with his magical playmaking. Some of his passing was nothing short of sensational, with his long, searching balls from his own half particularly catching the eye. There were also very few deficiencies in his short passing game, often requiring only one touch to find his target, which, when combined with his clever perpetual movement, was key to advancing Samp up the pitch. Composed, calm and able to gather almost any ball played into him under his command, he was great at receiving the ball when under pressure and maintaining possession. High levels of football intelligence and game reading, coupled with his tackling, allowed him to break up counter-attacks. At Sampdoria, he was compared to their greatest ever midfielder, club legend Nino Cerezo. The similarities were clear to see. Firstly, they were both tasked with playing in a similar regista-type role, although Veron at times looked more like a roaming playmaker as he covered the whole pitch and was more attack than defensively minded. They both had a similar build, tall and thin, with Veron being slightly the taller of the two. The dribbling styles and unpredictable yet artistic way of moving with the ball also bore a striking resemblance. Veron's wonderful performances naturally saw him linked with a move away from Sampdoria, and before the league season had even finished, it was already widely known that he would not be in Genoa the following year.
This is Veron, who's been playing really well for Sampdoria this season, and the word is that he will be leaving come the end of the campaign, maybe for Parma. They seem to be the favourites to sign him. He's going to be an important man today, Ray, looking behind Montella.
Yes, that's right. He's a wonderful footballer. He's a normal person being the midfield role, midfield playmaking role.
The departures of Talisman Mancini and manager Sven-Goran Eriksson, both to Lazio, had clearly had an effect as they finished 3 places worse off in Serie A than the year before, in 9th. By the time the 1998 World Cup rolled round, La Brahita had established himself as a key man in the Argentina midfield and was consequently on the plane to France in the summer. The Albiceleste were drawn in Group H alongside Japan, Jamaica and Croatia. They kicked off their tournament with an entertaining match against the Samurai Blue. The ultra-mobile Veron naturally had his hand in many of the good things his team did as they registered a 1-0 win against a spirited Japanese side who in all honesty they could and should have beaten by more. Their next game proved to be a lot more straightforward as they handed out a battering to Jamaica, putting 5 past them without reply. The final match against Croatia was the battle for top spot and the toughest opposition La Brahita and the boys had faced thus far. It was a tight affair which never really got going. After surviving an early scare from Davor Suker, Pineda gave Argentina the lead just before half-time and they managed to keep hold of it. The last 16 match against England was a chaotic classic. It had everything. David Seaman's howler, Michael Owen's dive, a wonder strike from the boy wonder, a cleverly taken Veron free kick, emphatically finished by Zanetti, and all of this in the first half. The second half is infamous for David Beckham's completely blown out of proportion moment of madness for which he was sent off for violent conduct after only 2 minutes. The game went the distance and in a terribly tense penalty shootout, David Batty's miss was the decider. Argentina had just 3 days to collect themselves after a mentally, physically and emotionally draining game before facing the Netherlands in the quarters. The Dutch took advantage of their fatigue and took the lead through Kluivert within 15 minutes. Claudio Lopez equalised 5 minutes later. An absorbing encounter was decided by one of the all-time great World Cup goals, Dennis Bergkamp's stunner at the death. After the international disappointments, it was on to pastures new for La Brahita in club football. As predicted, the 23-year-old swapped Sampdoria for Parma, who paid £15 million for him. This was a price that placed him amongst the very best players in the world at the time. It was only £5 million or so less than Inter had paid Barca for R9 the year previously, and the same amount Newcastle shelled out to bring Shearer in from Blackburn in 1996, and Seba was worth every penny. The Parma team he was joining was the stuff my 90s retro nostalgic footballing dreams are made of. In between the sticks and the last line of defence was a 20-year-old Gigi Buffon. Manager Alberto Malassani most commonly went for 3 at the back, and with the most frequent combination being Lilian Thuram, Nestor Cincini and Fabio Cannavaro. All 3 of them were rocks at the back. Cincini was an intelligent and versatile ball winner and an excellent man marker. Thuram had been voted as Serie A's best defender in the 2 seasons prior to the 98-99 campaign. He was fast, strong and good on the ball and was given license to maraud up the pitch and contribute to the attack. And Cannavaro is simply one of the best defenders of all time, great in the air and a wonderful passer. At left midfield was club legend and captain Antonio Benarivo. Quick and with brilliant stamina, he could bomb up and down the flank all day, whipping great balls into the box while at it. On the opposite wing was Diego Fuser, another quick and physically strong, accurate crosser of the ball. In central midfield was the other Baggio, Dino, and Frenchman Alain Bogosian, who had followed Veron from Samp that summer. Baggio was tasked with a ball-winning role, and the quality all-rounder Bogosian was able to contribute in all phases of play. Up front, Enrico Chiesa and Hernan Crespo formed an unstoppable and lethal duo. The agile trickery of a Chiesa in his prime blended beautifully with the powerful tenacity of Veron's Argentina teammate Crespo, and both of them knew fine well how to find the back of the net. They ended up with 25 goals and 14 league assists between them that season. Tying it all together in the attacking midfield position was La Brujita. With Baggio and Bogosian holding the fort, Veron could focus his energy on the offense. Players like Luigi Sartor, Faustino Asprilla, Roberto Musi, Stefano Fiore, Mario Stanic and Abel Balbo all played their part over the course of the season. Parma were fast, fluid and flipping fun to watch when attacking, and La Brujita was the beating heart of their offense. He was everywhere and involved in everything. Veron officially notched up 6 assists in Serie A that season, but so many goals were only scored because of an intervention from Seba. Whether it was intelligently placing a perfectly weighted ball into the path of the charging Fusser to burst into the box and feed Crespo, or skillfully keeping the ball in play before giving the defender the eyes and finding Chiesa with a disguised pass to deliver it on a sixpence for his buddy Crespo, or intercepting a poor clearance, cushioning a header to Baggio who could completely wrong-foot the defence and knock it to Chiesa to lash in a shot of which Crespo picked up the pieces. So often Veron's was the pass before the assist, or he was the man to start the whole move off from midfield with a clever piece of space-creating play which allowed them to launch a devastating attack. At Samp, Mihailovic had taken set pieces most of the time, but free kicks and corners were more or less Veron's job at Parma, and he provided 2 Serie A assists in this way. Seba had also clearly taken a leaf out of Mancini's book and was an extremely vocal presence on the pitch for Parma, marshalling, motivating and mobilising his teammates, as well as being the resident referee botherer. The long-serving Parma defender Luigi Apollini had missed that whole season due to injury, but recalls Veron's influence. Inside the locker room he was a calm player, thoughtful, but when he said something he did it with a sense of belonging. He was an example. He ran for 3, for the team, even if, in training, he didn't really like to be tied down to tactical questions and often clashed with Malesani. He was able to change the game with passes of 40, 50, 70 metres and put it on your foot. He already knew things before doing them. He had technical intelligence combined with tactical skills. Despite some very impressive results like a famous 4-0 win over eventual champions AC Milan or a 4-2 victory over Zidane's Juventus at the Stadio delle Alpi, Parma were unable to mount a serious challenge and finished 15 points behind the Rossoneri in 4th. Parma's season will go down in history for what they did in the cups. Veron actually missed 4 matches of Parma's Coppa Italia run before returning to the team in the quarter-final second leg and having a vital impact, scoring 1 and assisting 1 as Iducali beat Udinese 4-0 to overturn a 3-2 first leg defeat. Veron carried his scoring form into the semis, netting in both legs as Parma made light work of Inter, defeating them 4-1 on aggregate. They would face Fiorentina in the final. The first leg was played at the Ennio Tardini, Parma's home. Veron let it be known within minutes that he was in the mood and going to be trouble, picking up the ball just inside his own half and tearing down the centre of the pitch before getting a shot away on the edge of the box. Unfortunately, it was tame and straight at the keeper. A cleverly taken Fiorentina free kick flummoxed the Parma defence, and an incensed Buffon had to be at his best to deny La Viola the opener in what was a frenetic first 10 minutes. The breathless pace continued until Mario Stanic embarked on a great run down the right, sent a teasing ball across to Crespo, who was predictably in the right place at the right time to take advantage of a lapse in concentration from Thomas Repka. Parma took control of the match and were pushing to extend their lead. They were unable to do so, and in the 80th minute Buffon spilled Edmundo's shot into the path of Batistuta, who bundled it into an open net to level more or less against the run of play. The return leg was another cracking match. At the end of a close first half, which I would say Parma just about edged, Stanic once more caused trouble down the right and found Fusser cheekily. The Italian squared a great ball to Crespo, who opened the scoring with a lovely back heel. 4 minutes into the second half, Parma failed to deal with a set piece and Repka was able to capitalise and atone for his first leg howler, scooping the ball past Buffon. A quarter of an hour later, and to Malesani and Buffon's dismay, Parma had still not learned their lesson and Fiorentina took the lead for the first time in the tie, again from a free kick. 20 minutes from time and Parma produced a moment of real quality. Enrico Chiesa whipped a perfect cross to the back post following some fine skill and Paolo Vanoli was on the end of it to head home. The match ended 2-2, 3-3 on aggregate, which meant that Parma had won the Italian Cup on away goals. In my opinion, this is the cruelest of ways to lose a cup final, and I am personally very glad we no longer have two-legged finals, or indeed the away goals rule. In the UEFA Cup, Parma were a real force and played magnificently, especially at home where they were ultra-attacking. Often this was out of necessity, as in the 8 matches leading up to the semi-finals, they failed to win away from home, losing 2 and drawing 2. They emphatically blew teams away in Italy though, winning 3-1 against Rangers in the round of 16 and scalping Bordeaux 6-0 in the quarters. They banished their away day hoodoo in the semis against Atletico Madrid. La Brujita was naturally instrumental at the Vicente Calderón, twice supplying Chiesa, the first time driving unchallenged down the middle before giving it to Enrico, who scored a beautiful goal from the corner of the box. The second was a corner which Chiesa initially headed against the woodwork, but managed to stick away at the second time of asking. They took a 3-1 lead back with them to the Ennio Tardini. With just over half an hour played, Veron nicked the ball in his own half, strode forward with typical purpose and took the Atletico backline out of the game completely with an exquisite reverse ball into the feet of Balbo, who coolly rounded the keeper to score. They went on to win the match 2-1 and the tie 5-2 on aggregate to make it to the final in frightening fashion. By contrast, their opponents Marseille had scraped through their semi against Bologna on away goals, courtesy of a late Laurent Blanc penalty. L'OM were simply unable to cope with the brilliance of Ito Cali as La Brujita gave one of his best ever performances in that iconic Parma jersey. He was the magisterial orchestrator of a fine team display. As he had done so often that season, Seba won the aerial contest for a long ball and flicked it towards the goal. Laurent Blanc was uncharacteristically unaware of the lurking Crespo and tried to touch it back to Stefan Porato. Crespo pounced and deftly guided the ball over the on-rushing goalie to give Parma the lead after 26 minutes. 10 minutes later, Fusser sent a nice cross towards the penalty spot where Violi was blissfully free to head in the second. Not long after the restart, Thuram and Veron combined well on the right. Crespo let La Brujita's cross bounce between his legs to fall perfectly for Chiesa to blast a rocket into the top corner. It was a real golazo to seal the victory for Parma. It was the second time in 5 years that they had won the UEFA Cup. It would have been impossible for Juan Sebastian not to have garnered attention following his sensational season, and so it unfolded that Veron was tempted into an £18.5 million move to Lazio with the promise of a substantial bump in his wages and the prospect of teaming up with some familiar faces. Roberto Mancini and Sinisa Mihajlovic were of course two players he knew well from his Sampdoria days. There was also a trio from the Argentina national team. Mateus Almeida had arrived from Sevilla 2 seasons prior. Diego Simeone had been brought in that same window from Inter, with Christian Vieri going in the other direction, and Nestor Cincini joined La Brujita in swapping Genoa for Rome in an €8 million deal. Last but not least, they were managed by the man who had taken Veron to Italy 3 years previously, Sven-Goran Eriksson. As well as the 3 Argentines brought in that summer, the Lazio squad had received significant investment over the past 3 seasons. Pavel Nedved, Alan Boksic, Sergio Conceição, Dejan Stankovic, Marcelo Salas, Mancini, Mihajlovic and Almeida had all been bought and added to some fine Italian talent like Alessandro Nesta and Simeone Inzaghi, with the ultimate goal of winning the Scudetto for the second time in the club's history. The season before, when La Brujita had been tearing it up for Parma, Lazio had come agonisingly close, losing out to Milan by a single point. Veron can only be seen as the missing piece of the jigsaw, the man to make the difference and tip the balance in a Bianco-Celeste's favour. The first order of business for Lazio was the European Super Cup against Manchester United, a trophy they were entitled to contest due to winning the Cup Winners' Cup in 1999. A close match was settled by a single Marcelo Salas goal to kick the season off in successful fashion. To say that La Brujita started the season on fire would be a complete understatement. Under the tactically astute Eriksson, Lazio were more measured and pragmatic than the gung-ho Parma, and back in his favourite central midfield starting position, Veron was more often called upon to help in and around his own box. This was fine, as it allowed him to fire off those divine crossfield balls from deep to the forwards Boksic, Inzaghi, Mancini or Salas. But with Simeone and Almeida covering his back, doing the dirty work, he also had plenty of license to venture forward, and when he did join the attack, he could focus all his attention on being creative. The results were eye-watering. Seba scored 5 and assisted 5 in his first 9 league games as Lazio went unbeaten and roared to the top of the table with 21 points, 3 ahead of Juventus. Now, it would be a crime for me not to draw attention to the fact that one of those goals was scored direct from a corner kick against Hellas Verona. On match day 10, Lazio tasted their first league defeat of the season, a 4-1 loss away to Roma. The following game was a massive one between first and second, Lazio v Juventus. Despite chances for both sides, it ended in a 0-0 draw. Lazio won their next 3 games, each by a score of 2-0, with Veron adding another couple of assists to his tally. At this point, the Bianco-Celesti were 2 points ahead of the Old Lady, who were breathing down their necks, matching them blow for blow. And while Lazio and Juve were locked in a close title fight, the debate debate was simultaneously raging about which one of their two midfielders were the best in the league, and perhaps the world, Juan Sebastian Veron or Zinedine Zidane. With La Brujita in the form of his life, it is hard for me to choose between the two. Both of them were pass masters of the highest order, with the kind of vision required to see balls that others simply could not. They could both attempt a wide range of passes, but Veron perhaps had the edge with his 50-metre homing missiles. The pair possessed an exquisite first touch, and they always seemed to be able to control the ball effortlessly. They were both great at juggling the ball with their back to the defender, and then flicking it on nonchalantly, which was so fun to watch. They both took set pieces and had no problem scoring or assisting in this way. Both of them chipped in with goals from midfield, although Zidane was the more consistent of the two in this regard, as Veron's 8 league goals that season were something of an anomaly and a career best. Both of them were so important in the way their team attacked, controlling and orchestrating things. There's no wonder the question of who was better was the source of such debate, as they were both bloody brilliant. Match day 15 marked the beginning of a stark reversal in fortunes. Lazio lost 2-0 to Venezia, while Juventus beat Hellas Verona 1-0 to move to the top of the table for the first time that season. The old lady went unbeaten the next 11 matches, of which they won 8. By contrast, in the same period, Lazio won only 5 games, drawing 4, losing 2, subsequently falling 9 points behind. With only 8 games left to play, it looked like Lazio's Scudetto dream was dead and buried. The next 2 match days would change everything. Juventus lost 2-0 to Milan, while Lazio beat Roma 2-1 on match day 27, with Veron grabbing the vital winner, a thunderous free kick. Then came a huge game in the title race, a potentially title-deciding 6-pointer between the top two. It was Juventus versus Lazio at the Stadio delle Alpi. Not surprisingly for a match of such significance, it was a cagey game of half chances. Predictably, it was La Brujita who made the difference, finding a way past a disorganised Juve defence with a lovely floated cross directly onto the forehead of Simeone, who just had to nod it home. It was a goal made in Argentina. With just over 20 minutes left to play, Juventus pushed for an equaliser, with the Lazio defence holding steadfastly onto their lead. In a remarkable turnaround, Lazio had cut the deficit from 9 points to 3 in the space of a week. The Biancocelesti went unbeaten in their next 5 matches, drawing once while Juventus won 4 and lost 1 of theirs. This meant Juve were 2 points ahead of Lazio going into the final day of the season, and it was a fittingly epic finale to what had been one of the most exciting Serie A seasons in recent memory. Lazio were beating Regina 2-0 at half-time, courtesy of Inzaghi and Veron penalty kicks. That was when a divine intervention helped destiny to be fulfilled, as the heavens opened and dropped a biblical deluge upon Juventus, who were 0-0 at half-time against Perugia. Pierluigi Collina decided to continue with the second half of the game. After a long delay, there was an eruption of joy in Rome as they heard that Alessandro Calori had scored for Perugia on the 49th minute. With Lazio already finished their match, tense fans and players listened anxiously to the radio in the Stadio Olimpico, willing the game to finish without any changes. And that is exactly what happened. There were scenes of utter jubilation as Lazio's first Scudetto in 26 years and only the second in their history was celebrated by all present. There was no time to dwell on that momentous achievement though, as 4 days later they had the second leg of the Coppa Italia final against Inter to contend with. Veron had been an unused substitute as Lazio won the first leg 2-1 at home. He started in the San Siro in a game which ended goalless, meaning he had completed his second double in as many years. His second season in Rome, the 2000-2001 campaign, was overshadowed by a nationwide scandal, investigations for which had begun in April 2000. It all centred on Veron's passport. The Serie A imposed a limit of 5 non-EU players that clubs were allowed to register. Veron had pushed them up to that number when he joined from Parma, as Lazio already had the Chilean Salas, the Czech Nedved, the Serbian Stankovic and the Croatian Boksic in their squad. The problem was caused by the additional restrictions of Article 40, which limited teams to naming only 3 non-EU players in any given matchday squad. This presented Lazio with a problem. Given how common it had been for Italians to emigrate to South America, many players from there had been naturalised by way of a distant Italian ancestor. Veron's mother had told him that he had such a predecessor, which he duly pointed out to his new club. Lazio hired a law firm in Buenos Aires and an expert in such matters, translator Maria Elena Tedaldi, who scoured the country. He discovered the existence of a Giuseppe Antonio Porcella, who was born in Cosenza, Italy, in 1870, and client had emigrated to Argentina, where he fathered Veron's great-grandfather. The requisite documents, birth, marriage and death certificates, were sent to Rome, and Veron was duly furnished with an Italian passport on 9th of September 1999, meaning he no longer took up one of those pesky non-EU slots. All was hunky-dory until complaints regarding the validity of the documents were lodged with the relevant authorities, who began an investigation. They uncovered a fraud. Veron's ancestor was actually the extremely Argentinian Irineo Portela, not Giuseppe Porcella. The lineage and all the certificates had been forged. Maria Tedaldi had uncovered an Italian relative, but this was on Veron's mother's side, and according to an old Argentinian law, the process of legally verifying this would have taken a year and a half, obviously much longer than Lazio could stand the wait. So Giuseppe Porcella was invented. Lazio claimed Tedaldi had acted alone and scammed them, something she obviously refuted. A long-running legal battle ensued. Veron had avoided a ban, but the potential punishments were said to be far more serious. Lazio had fielded Veron irregularly for 19 matches. Their Scudetto was at stake. Relegation was a possibility. However, Milan, Sampdoria, Inter and Roma, amongst others, had also been caught up in Passport Gate. The idea of relegating all of them was unthinkable, so the overall punishments were softened. Long story short, Maria Tedaldi was sentenced to 15 months in jail, and Veron and Lazio's president at the time, Sergio Cranotti, were eventually acquitted in 2007. Veron's time on the pitch was affected, and he made only 22 Serie A appearances. Lazio's bid to retain their Scudetto was dealt a further blow when Sven-Göran Eriksson left to manage England halfway through the season. They finished third, 6 points behind winners Roma. His love for Rome, a city which reminded him of Buenos Aires, had been tainted, and his mind was made up to leave. His agent had visited England in January and talked to clubs like Manchester United about the possibility of signing Veron, and it worked.
Juan Sebastian Veron finally to United. United's manager Alex Ferguson said the Argentine midfielder was one of the best players in the world.
Juan Sebastian Veron underwent a medical this morning after arriving from Buenos Aires. The fee will be a British record £23 million.
I think everyone is sat up in the dressing room and they're really impressed by the signing, because they know they're getting a top player.
In addition to shelling out £28 million to sign him, sensibly, a so-called passport clause had been inserted into his contract, which obligated Lazio to pay his wages in the event he was suspended. Had there not been all the trouble with the passport row, then I think I would have stayed at Lazio. I made the right decision to leave, but I'll never forget Italy, and I thank the fans for their support. It would be great if I could return one day, Veron later admitted. There was no questioning Veron's credentials as a world-class player, and simply one of the best midfielders on the market. What most in England were wondering was, did United actually need him? Manchester United had won 3 Premier League titles in a row, with a midfield 4 of Ryan Giggs, Paul Scholes, Roy Keane and David Beckham. Nicky Butt also got his fair share of game time. The exceptional Scholes was the player with whom La Brujita had the most in common style-wise, their range of passing, their love of attacking from midfield. Such was the similarities between the two that Scholes has since admitted that Veron's arrival had him fearing for his position.
About going forward a lot and attacking from midfield. We were very similar players, and I thought, yeah, I might have to go now. Well, you do, of course you do, because you've signed such a brilliant player, thinking, oh, can I live up to that? He's such an athlete.
Not only that, but Beckham was the team's resident dead ball specialist, so Veron wouldn't be getting much of a look in on free kicks and corners. Sir Alex Ferguson had stuck staunchly to a 4-4-2 formation throughout his career. However, given how easily Manchester United had been brushed aside in the quarter-finals of the 2001 Champions League by Bayern Munich, who played through the United midfield like they weren't there at times, Fergie was in the mood to experiment. To add even more layers to all this, the 01-02 season was said to be Sir Alex's last at Old Trafford, having announced his intention to retire upon its conclusion. Not only that, but the venue for that year's Champions League final was Hampden Park, in the legendary Scottish manager's hometown of Glasgow. To deliver a second Champions League crown in such a perfect setting, well, you couldn't write a more poetic and beautiful way for him to bow out. Veron had clearly been brought in with the idea of dominating Europe in mind. However, Seba hadn't exactly been buzzing at the thought of playing in the Prem. Truth be told, I had a pessimistic view about playing in England, as I imagined that life there would be so different to what I was used to, the Latin lifestyle. But I found an extraordinary club. You could hardly find one as well organised, with so many people willing to help. and they clearly had done all they could to help him settle, as just as he had done at Lazio, he made a sensational start. In his second match, he helped United open the scoring away to Blackburn, feeding Ryan Giggs with a classy ball. He then scored in 3 of the 4 league games played in September. His first for the club came against Everton, a good strike following a lovely interchange with Roy Keane. He netted in the very next game, a fizzing opportunistic volley versus Newcastle. At the end of the month came one of the highlights of his whole United career. They were 3-0 down to Tottenham after 45 minutes at White Hart Lane. Fergie had evidently given them the hairdryer at halftime because they came out flying. Goals from Andy Cole, Laurent Blanc and fellow big money summer signing Ruud van Nistelrooy got them back level. On the 76th minute, Seba collected Solskjaer's layoff and sent a brilliant angled strike into the bottom corner to complete a quite unbelievable comeback. Beckham added the cherry on top of a classic victory 3 minutes from time. Veron was a man in top form, something which was rightly recognised as he won the Premier League's Player of the Month award for September. Then, for a variety of reasons, the wheels came off. Firstly, due to the differences in match preparation between the Serie A and the Premier League, Veron started to fatigue. If there was one thing that played against me, I'd say it was the physical conditioning. I was used to the Italian way, which was key for our game, but in England during that time, the physical conditioning was to play games. I wasn't used to playing without an intense preparation, and it wasn't ideal for me in the long term. As we played more matches, my performance levels dropped. If you add this to the frequently frantic pace of Premier League football, then it's no wonder that Veron looked a bit dazed and confused at times, and was caught in possession much more than he ever had been in Italy. Secondly, Ferguson would switch between his trusty 4-4-2 and a 4-5-1 formation, whereas at Lazio or Parma, he more or less knew exactly where he would be playing and exactly what his job was going to be every week. That wasn't the case at United that season. His teammates also had to get used to the new formation and performances suffered. Thirdly, Scholes and Veron playing together wasn't great due to their forward-looking mindset.
I couldn't really play with Veron because we were both too similar. If we played together, it could be a disaster. Roy Keane was perfect for me. Nicky Butt was perfect. We've got to have that right blend, and me and Veron together, there just wasn't going to be space in that team for both of us.
And lastly, there was the language barrier, with Ferguson later revealing in his biography that La Brujita spoke only to say, "Morning, mister." As Seba explains, the language barrier was an issue for me too, but I had very friendly relationships with my teammates. That said, it was probably an issue in my social life outside the club. That was my fault. A shock loss to Bolton on match day 10 sparked a dreadful run of form, as they won just once in 7 games, sinking as low as 6th in the table. United then got their act together, went on an 8-game winning run, had a blip in the form of a 1-0 loss to Liverpool, then went on a 7-match unbeaten streak, putting themselves back in contention for the title, finding themselves at the top of the table going into match week 31, a point ahead of Arsenal, who had a game in hand. United's game that weekend was against Middlesbrough. Within 10 minutes, Veron had made a costly error, dallying on the ball and allowing Benito Carbone to nick in and feed La Brujita's former Lazio teammate Alan Boksic to open the scoring. Man United were unable to score and lost the game, handing the impetus to the Gunners in the title race. Roy Keane reportedly flew off the handle at Veron in the dressing room after the game. Seba was dropped for the next 4 league matches, all of which United won, while Veron was well and truly under the microscope in England, with every wayward pass and wild shot at goal scrutinised. Glowing headlines were being written about his performances in the Champions League. He put in dazzling display after dazzling display on the European stage, where the pace of matches was more akin to the Serie A, his beautiful assist for Ryan Giggs against Olympiacos in the groups being a particular highlight. In the quarter-finals, he laid on a couple of fine assists for Ole Solskjaer, the second of which was an incisive pass with the outside of his boot.
Отличный пас, Solskjaer!
United faced off against Bayer Leverkusen in the semis. A good team, don't get me wrong, but with the wealth of world-class talent that Manchester United had, they were expected to march into the finals. They drew both games, 2-2 at home, 1-1 in Germany, and crashed out on away goals. Chino is said to have let rip at Veron after the match once again, allegedly furious at how the Argentine had pulled out of a challenge when the team were losing. The tabloids had a field day, gleefully reporting that La Brujita was ready to leave United after falling out with his team. A week after the semis, United faced Arsenal in the league, sitting 5 points off the top spot. It was the penultimate match of the season. The press conference before the match was the scene of a now infamous Fergie blow-up. Arsenal won 3-0, went on to finish the season as champions of England, while United endured their worst finish in over a decade of third. Veron, along with the once brilliant but suddenly hapless Barthez, was a scapegoat for the season's failures. Roy Keane has since expressed regret for the way he treated Veron in that first campaign. I was very hard on Seba, and I was wrong. When he came, I was expecting miracles. When they didn't happen, I was always homing in on him, and now I know it takes time. A tough year got even worse in the summer at the 2002 World Cup in Korea and Japan. Veron captained Argentina and oversaw a catastrophe. Things started so well as La Berjita assisted Batistuta in the 1-0 defeat of Nigeria. Then came a shit show against England. Seba was hooked at half-time in a match they lost 1-0. The media viciously turned on him, saying that his club allegiances have outweighed his national pride. He had purposefully underperformed. He had deliberately kicked the ball out of play. He was public enemy number one and subsequently dropped to the bench for the final critical group game against Sweden. It ended 1-1 and La Albiceleste's tournament was over. It was the World Cup that wasn't. We were carrying too many problems, particularly physical ones. Personally, I wasn't fit, and neither was the team. Our results reflected this. Sir Alex Ferguson had reversed his decision to retire and so was still at the helm going into the new season. Veron was in desperate need of a good 02-03 campaign with Man United to turn things around. Seba got some personal good fortune at the start of the season as Roy Keane was sidelined for months with a hip injury. Rio Ferdinand has since explained why Veron and Kino just did not gel on the pitch.
You know what, Roy Keane was his biggest problem. In all the teams that Seba Veron played in, he was the go-to guy. He'd get the ball off the defenders, he'd get the ball off everywhere, he'd be joining the defenders to the attack, he'd be knitting everything together. Come to Man United, as he's going to get the ball off the back four, Roy Keane's already there screaming. And if Roy Keane ain't in the right position, and Seba is, Roy Keane's got the loudest voice. Oi! Give me the ball, hey! So Seba sometimes weren't getting the ball in the areas where he normally would. So it wasn't as normal for him in the Man United team. That's the only reason he failed. It weren't based on ability.
Enjoying the freedom, Veron started to look much more like the genius midfield orchestrator that they had paid Lazio 30 million quid for, as he took control in games and pulled the strings for United. His best performance in that time and one of his finest in a United shirt was the 2-0 victory over Arsenal. With Butt, Keane and Beckham all absent, La Berjita bossed the midfield alongside Scholes, even bagging himself a tap-in from the wee man's perfect cross. His free kick against West Ham in the continued absence of Beck's the very next game also wasn't bad. Nowhere was his resurgence more evident than in Europe, where his start to the Champions League campaign was breathtaking, scoring 4 and assisting 3 in 5 group stage games. A venomous strike as he ran onto a loose ball in the penalty box against Maccabi Haifa. A classy given goal with David Beckham which he finished with a cheeky lob against Olympiacos. Another good interchange, this time with Giggs, finished off with a thumper on the edge of the box in the return fixture against the Greek Giants. A great first touch to set himself up for a wonderful volley against Leverkusen. They were all Golazzos and Veron was showing that he was still one of the very best players in Europe and that he belonged on his grandest stage. In the Premier League, United spent the first half of the campaign some distance behind leaders Arsenal, who looked to have a stranglehold on the league. A 3-1 loss to Middlesbrough on matchday 20 provided a bomb up the bum for the Red Devils to go on a 9-match unbeaten run in which Seba started all but 2 games and provided 2 assists, one of which was an absolutely glorious defence-splitting pass for Beckham against Birmingham.
Looks to left the goalkeeper and succeeds.
Veron then picked up a foot injury and was sidelined for the rest of the Premier League season, barring a 20-minute cameo on the second to last game against Charlton. Manchester United went on a complete tear in this time, winning 8 and drawing 1 of their final 9 games as they turned the tables completely and won the Premier League, finishing 5 points ahead of the Gunners. Now these are the kind of things that people remember. Veron gets injured and the team subsequently win the league, as if they were struggling because he was in the team, when in actuality he had been instrumental to starting them off on their great run of form after Christmas. To me, Veron remains a bit of an unsung hero and a forgotten man of that title win. In the Champions League, Seba was rushed back from his injury to face Real Madrid in the second leg of the quarters, with United trailing 3-1. Despite his cross leading to a Helguera own goal and United winning 4-3, it was not enough to turn the tide and their European dreams ended prematurely once again. In the summer, Chelsea expressed interest in acquiring Veron's services. Seba wanted to stay stay and fight for his place, but the offer was too good to refuse. As Fergie explained, it's always difficult letting good players go, but we are very, very well off in midfield, and the overall package made it too interesting for us not to take it. He was on a massive salary and it's worth a lot of money to us. We have a collection of central midfield players who made my life difficult enough as it is, so when an offer came in for Seba, we decided to take it. The fee was £15 million, half what United had paid for him just 2 years ago. Upon completion of the deal, Veron had this to say: "Ferguson trusted me when I first arrived, but later on it seemed we did not understand each other as well. There were times when I felt he preferred some of my teammates." To this day, the enduring narrative is that Juan Sebastian Veron was a massive failure and expensive flop at Manchester United. I personally do not subscribe to that point of view. The record-breaking transfer fee naturally put huge pressure on him to deliver, and I think many fans hoped and believed he would have a similar impact to Eric Cantona. So, while the numerous factors I have already mentioned prevented him from living up to those perhaps unrealistic expectations, he still played some great football, made some important contributions, won the league, and produced some moments of pure class. Not a flop for me. He started well at Chelsea, scoring on his league debut, a 2-1 victory over Liverpool. Then he was beset by back injuries and hardly played, managing just 7 Premier League appearances that season, 14 in all competitions. The arrival of Jose Mourinho in the summer of 04 facilitated an eventual 2-year loan spell for Veron at Inter Milan. While there is some debate to be had over Veron's legacy at United, there can be no such confusion over his time at Chelsea. It simply did not work for him there, and the signing was an expensive failure. Back in Italy and the Serie A, the setting which had inspired Veron to create jaw-dropping moments of magic and had been the source of the greatest triumphs of his career, La Brujita was back to his best. His manager there was Roberto Mancini, someone we already know had been a huge part of Veron's footballing journey and a massive positive influence on him. Veron later reflected on his time with Mancini. "The memories I have with him are plenty and truly beautiful, both as a player and as Inter coach. I owe him a very special thanks. When few people relied on me, he strongly believed in me." There were many of his countrymen there also: Javier Zanetti, Esteban Cambiaso, Julio Cruz and Kili. In his first season there, he established himself as an important player, with only injuries stopping him from featuring more than he did. He scored 3 and assisted 1 in 24 Serie A appearances as Inter finished 3rd. He also helped the team to win the Coppa Italia that season. The 05-06 campaign started off great for Seba, as he scored the decisive injury time winner against Juventus in the Italian Super Cup. Veron continued to play in the excellent manner that we know he was all too capable of, laying on 6 assists in 25 Serie A appearances, aiding Inter in achieving a 2nd place finish, 15 points behind runaway leaders Juventus. However, the Calciopoli match-fixing scandal broke, and Juventus were stripped of their title and relegated, meaning that the runners-up, Inter Milan, became champions of Italy by default. They won the Coppa Italia again that season, but Veron did not feature for them in that competition. Veron had rebuilt his Premier League damaged reputation, recaptured his spark and reaffirmed his status as a magisterial artist, a painter of midfield masterpieces. In my opinion, more should be made of Veron's time at Inter and his crucial influence in that successful team. Still on the books at Chelsea, La Brujita went on another loan in 2006, this time to the club which he supported, their club where it had all began for him all those years ago, Estudiantes. The club at that time were managed by his former teammate and friend Diego Simeone. In his first season back with the club, he was a key figure in helping them win the Premier Division Apertura, chipping in with 2 goals and 3 assists. Off the pitch, he was also doing big things. His donations to the club's training facility led to an agreement with the municipality to reopen their stadium and rebuild the stands so that it was up to modern standards. Veron started every game for Argentina in the 2007 Copa America tournament, helping them to reach the final where they lost 3-0 to Brazil. During that competition, Veron struck up a friendship with and became something of a mentor to a young Lionel Messi. Upon expiration of his contract, Veron spent a further 6 seasons at Estudiantes, and he set about cementing his status as a bona fide club legend. Despite his advancing years, he was frequently recognised as one of the best players in the country. His crowning glory came in 2009. Channeling the energy of his father, La Bruja, the man who had led Estudiantes to their last Copa Libertadores victory, La Brujita captained the team, an utterly played out of his skin and was in some of the best form of his life in the South American version of the Champions League. At the grand old age of 34, he scored 1 and assisted 5 for Los Pincharatas on their imperious march to the final, where they faced Brazilian club Cruzeiro. A tight first leg encounter in La Plata finished 0-0. The second leg in Belo Horizonte was dramatic. Enrique's deflected strike gave Cruzeiro the lead after 53 minutes. 5 minutes later, Gaston Fernandes equalised from close range. The decisive moment came from two predictable sources. Veron sent in a trademark corner for the competition's top scorer Mauro Bocelli to head in the winner with just over a quarter of an hour left to play. The outpouring of emotion and joy at the final whistle was intense. Let them enjoy this. It's for the fans. It's unique, said Seba. Veron is the greatest ever Estudiantes player, said Alex Sabella, the Sheffield United and Leeds midfielder of the 1970s and 80s. La Brujita was unanimously voted as the player of the tournament by visitors to FIFA's website. Fresh from that glorious success, Veron was called up by Diego Maradona to the 2010 World Cup. Messi and Veron shared a room in South Africa, and Leo arguably played his best football at the tournament when him and La Brujita shared a pitch. Bizarrely, Veron was left on the bench for the quarter-final against Germany, which La Albiceleste lost 4-0. A month after the World Cup, Veron hit out at Maradona's tactics and his misuse of Messi, as well as Diego's decision to drop him. One moment, he told me he wanted me to be the Xavi of the team. Then you see yourself outside and not playing, and this hurts. This started a rift between the friends, which was never fully repaired before Diego Maradona's death in 2020. Seba played for 3 more seasons at Estudiantes before hanging up his boots in 2014 at the age of 39. He was voted in as president of the club, a post he still holds to this day. In 2016, Veron struck up a challenge to the club's supporters. He would return to the field if 65% of the boxes at the new stadium were bought. This target was reached, and so, in January 2017, Veron pulled on the red and white stripes for another handful of games at the age of 42. Juan Sebastian Veron had an extremely long, extremely eventful and extremely successful career, one littered with recurring characters and poetic symmetry. He left an enduring mark and a lasting legacy at many great clubs. He was a man you could rely on not only in the big games and finals, but over the course of a whole season. He is without a doubt one of the very best midfielders of his generation, capable of doing mind-blowingly beautiful things with the ball, and yet he is rarely, if ever, mentioned in the same breath as the greats of his era. Part of the reason for that is his strange international career. Despite doing a grand job for Argentina all across the midfield and making 71 appearances, he was never able to shake the traitor tag which had been stuck on him at the 2002 World Cup. He was often booed by the fans and attacked by the media in what was a difficult decade for La Albiceleste.
En la mitad de la cancha se lucha y va ganando el calvo con Verón. Criticado, La Brujita Verón.
Another reason could be his numbers. Given how stats obsessed we are nowadays, people may look disparagingly on the fact that he never managed more than 10 league goals a season for any of his clubs. While I do also find it strange that a player with striking abilities of his caliber never got into double figures in a single league campaign, he wasn't always asked to play in that more advanced role. And we all know that his game was about much more than just goals or assists. That being said, 75 goals and 123 assists in 647 appearances for club and country is more than respectable, but I feel his general lack of recognition is due in most part to a strange phenomenon. If a player has tried and failed to make it in the Premier League, especially Manchester United, then mention of their achievements before or after that period are met with a comment like, yeah, but he was shite at United. The exact same thing happened with Fabian Barthez. A wonky season at Old Trafford, and everyone forgets he won literally everything in football and was one of the best goalies in the world for much of his career. Ultimately, my thoughts on Juan Sebastian Veron have been summed up much more eloquently and succinctly by a much better man than I many years ago.